Natalie Collins. Anderson stared at her phone, the words blurring through unshed tears. Theodore Mitchell passed away peacefully in his sleep. The text from the family lawyer felt surreal, yet the pain that shot through her chest was devastatingly real. At 32, Natalie had built a successful career as marketing director at Sterling & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Seattle. Her modest apartment overlooked Elliott Bay, and her life was comfortable, predictable, and most importantly, her own. She had worked hard to create this independence, to prove she could succeed without relying on the Anderson name or fortune. But none of that mattered now. The only person who had ever truly loved her was gone. Her mind drifted to childhood memories sitting in Grandfather Theo's study while he patiently explained business concepts, his weathered hands guiding hers as they worked through math problems together, the way his eyes would light up when she asked insightful questions about his company. Theodore Mitchell had been Richard Anderson's father, which technically made him her adoptive grandfather, but he had never treated her as anything less than his own blood. While the rest of the Anderson family reminded her daily that she was an outsider, the orphaned charity case they'd taken in after her parents died in a car accident when she was 6, Theo had seen something different. "Blood doesn't make a family, little one," he used to tell her, his voice warm with conviction. "Love does, and I've got plenty of that for you." Natalie wiped her eyes and reached for her laptop. She had vacation days saved up, and for the first time in 4 years, she would have to return to the Anderson estate. The thought made her stomach clench, but she owed it to Theo to say goodbye properly. As she booked her flight to San Francisco, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to change. Theo had always been strategic, thoughtful, and purposeful in everything he did. Even in death, she suspected he had plans that would surprise them all. The Anderson mansion stood as imposing as ever, its Georgian columns and perfectly manicured lawns a testament to old money and social status. Natalie paid the cab driver and stood for a moment, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Miss Natalie," Raymond's familiar voice called out. The elderly gardener who had always slipped her cookies during childhood hiding sessions approached with a sad but genuine smile. At 75, he moved more slowly than she remembered, but his eyes still held the same kindness. "Hello, Raymond," she said, accepting his warm embrace. "I'm so sorry about Grandfather." "He thought the world of you, you know," Raymond said, his voice thick with emotion. "Talked about you all the time. How proud he was of what you'd accomplished on your own." He paused, glancing toward the house. "They've been here since yesterday, going through his things already." The disapproval in his tone was unmistakable. Natalie felt her jaw tighten but nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She approached the front door, memories flooding back with each step. This had once been her home, though she'd never truly felt welcome in it. Taking a deep breath, she rang the bell. Margaret Anderson answered, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the supposed grief. At 58, she remained strikingly beautiful, though her expression when she saw Natalie was anything but welcoming. "Natalie, you came." No warmth, no embrace, just acknowledgement. "Of course I came," Natalie replied evenly. "Grandfather meant everything to me." "Well, the service is tomorrow." "Your old room is available, though some of Brooke's things might be stored there now." Margaret's tone suggested this was a generous accommodation rather than a right. Before Natalie could respond, Richard appeared from the study, looking haggard. Her adoptive father had aged significantly since she'd last seen him, his once dark hair now mostly gray, deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes. "Natalie," he nodded curtly. "Good of you to come?" The awkward moment was interrupted by Brooke's dramatic entrance down the staircase. At 34, she remained stunning. Her black designer dress clearly chosen to highlight her figure rather than express mourning. "Natalie, I wasn't sure you'd show up, considering how distant you've been." Brooke air-kissed near her cheeks. careful not to smudge her makeup. "I wouldn't miss saying goodbye to Grandfather," Natalie said quietly. "Well, it's not like he was your real grandfather," came a slurred voice from the direction of the bar cart. Wesley, already drinking at 11 in the morning, raised his glass in a mock toast, but he always did have a soft spot for strays. The casual cruelty hit exactly as intended. This was why she'd stayed away. Every interaction was layered with reminders that she didn't belong, that she was wearing an Anderson name she hadn't been born with. The next few hours were a parade of subtle slights and pointed remarks from various family members. Uncle Gerald commented on her department store attire. Aunt Victoria barely acknowledged her presence. Cousins whispered about the adopted one within earshot. Each interaction transported her back to childhood, being seated at the children's table long after her cousins had graduated to the adult table, being forgotten during family outings, overhearing Margaret explain to friends that she was adjusting well, considering her background, seeking refuge. Natalie escaped to the garden and found her old hiding spot beneath the weeping willow. Raymond appeared shortly after with a tray of tea. "Thought you might need this," he said kindly, settling beside her on the bench. "How was he at the end?" Natalie asked, accepting the tea gratefully. "At peace," Raymond replied. "He wasn't in pain, just went to sleep and didn't wake up. But before that—" He paused, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "He asked me to give you this, said you should read it alone, before tomorrow's will reading." The envelope bore her name in Theo's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, I've finally gone to that big boardroom in the sky. Don't grieve too much for me. I've had a good run. I'm writing to prepare you for what's coming. Tomorrow will be difficult. The family will show their true colors, as they always do when money is involved. But I've been watching all of you for years, making notes, testing character. You've never disappointed me. From the moment Richard and Margaret brought you home, I saw something special, not just intelligence, but compassion, integrity, and grit. You remind me of myself at your age, but better, because you've remained kind despite having every reason not to be. Tomorrow, trust Lawrence Bennett. He knows my wishes completely. And remember, sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind, but who you leave it to. The path ahead won't be easy. You'll face challenges that will test everything I've taught you, but I have complete faith in your abilities. With all my love, Grandfather P. The red journal in my desk contains everything you need to know about the company's real situation. Lawrence has the key. Natalie read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding. It seemed to hint at something significant about the will, but offered no clear details. Whatever was coming, Theo wanted her prepared for a fight. As she folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her purse, she noticed movement at the study window. Gerald was rifling through Theo's desk, his movements urgent and furtive. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the family wasn't just grieving, they were positioning themselves for whatever was to come. The offices of Bennett, Cohen and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building. Natalie arrived early, dressed professionally in a navy suit that commanded respect without being ostentatious. Lawrence Bennett, Theo's longtime friend and attorney, greeted her privately in his office. "Natalie, thank you for coming early. Theo asked me to go over a few things with you before the others arrive." Lawrence was a distinguished man in his 70s, with silver hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. He'd always treated Natalie with the same respect he showed the rest of the family, which she now realized might have been more significant than she'd understood. "Your grandfather's letter mentioned I should trust you," Natalie said, taking a seat. "Theo and I were friends for over 40 years. I know exactly what he wanted, and more importantly, why." He slid a folder across the desk. "These documents outline certain aspects of his estate planning that directly concern you." Natalie opened the folder to find complex legal documents about Mitchell Industries' corporate structure, succession planning, and a sealed envelope marked "Open Privately" in Theo's handwriting. Theo made significant changes to his will 5 years ago. Lawrence explained, after what happened at the company Christmas party. Natalie's stomach tightened at the memory. She'd briefly worked in Mitchell Industries' marketing department, a position Theo had offered despite her reservations. At the company Christmas party, Wesley had drunkenly announced that she was only there because of charity and tax write-offs. When she tried to defend herself, Margaret had pulled her aside and suggested she know her place and be grateful, instead of always wanting more. She'd resigned the next day. Theo was furious about how you were treated, Lawrence continued. Not just then, but throughout the years. He began watching everyone more closely, testing them. He would present family members with business scenarios, investment opportunities, ethical dilemmas, all designed to reveal character. He kept meticulous notes. Lawrence's expression was grim. The results were illuminating. Before he could elaborate, voices echoed from the reception area. The family had arrived. "There's something else," Lawrence said quickly, handing her a small key. "Theo's red journal, everything about the company's real financial situation is in there. You'll need it." As Lawrence led her to the main conference room, Natalie could hear the family's discussions about property renovations, vacation plans, and business strategies, not one word about missing Theo or honoring his memory. The conference room fell silent as she entered. Every pair of eyes turned to her with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed hostility. "Why was she meeting with you privately?" Margaret demanded. "All will be explained," Lawrence replied calmly, directing Natalie to a seat directly opposite the family, a physical manifestation of the divide that had always existed. Lawrence stood at the head of the table, commanding attention. "We are gathered here today to execute the last will and testament of Theodore James Mitchell. Before I proceed, I want to clarify that Theo revised his will significantly 5 years ago, with several codicils added in the intervening years." The family shifted impatiently. Gerald checked his expensive watch while Brooke scrolled through her phone. "I'll begin with personal bequests," Lawrence continued. "To his longtime gardener, Raymond Wallace, Theo leaves his collection of rare orchids and $50,000. This raised eyebrows around the table. $50,000 seemed excessive for hired help, though Natalie knew Raymond had been far more than an employee to Theo. Lawrence continued through various personal items. Margaret received her grandmother's pearls. Richard got first edition books. Brooke was given an antique vanity set. Wesley received vintage watches. Extended family members received similar items of sentimental but limited monetary value. "Where's the rest?" Gerald finally interrupted. "The company shares, the properties. I'm proceeding in the order Theo specified," Lawrence replied firmly. He outlined substantial charitable donations to causes Theo had supported, further depleting what the family considered their inheritance. "Now, regarding Mitchell Industries and the remainder of Theodore's estate," Lawrence finally said, causing everyone to lean forward expectantly. "Theodore made a decision that may surprise some of you, but one he considered carefully over many years. He chose his successor based on character, capability, and commitment to the values upon which he built Mitchell Industries." Richard straightened, clearly expecting to hear his name. Gerald did the same. 45% of Mitchell Industries, representing controlling interest and valued at approximately $1.8 billion, along with primary real estate holdings, including the Mitchell Building, the Lake Tahoe property, and Theo's primary residence, are bequeathed to Natalie Elizabeth Anderson. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. "This is impossible," Gerald shouted, his face turning purple. "She's not even blood! There must be a mistake!" Margaret gasped, swaying in her seat. Brooke knocked over her chair, standing up. "She manipulated him. This is elder abuse." Wesley slammed his fist on the table. You conniving little— However, Lawrence's voice cut through the din, there are conditions. The room gradually quieted as Lawrence continued. Natalie must serve as interim CEO for 1 year, during which time she must demonstrate her capability to lead Mitchell Industries. The board of directors will evaluate her performance, and if she fails to meet specified benchmarks, control will revert to Richard Anderson. This seemed to calm the family slightly. 1 year felt manageable, and they clearly didn't believe Natalie could succeed. Additionally, Lawrence said, producing a remote control, Theodore prepared a video message explaining his decision. The wall behind Lawrence slid open to reveal a large screen. As it flickered to life, the room fell silent. Theo appeared, recorded perhaps 6 months earlier. Though frail, his eyes were clear and sharp, his voice steady. Hello, family. If you're watching this, Lawrence has just informed you of my decision regarding Mitchell Industries. I imagine some of you are surprised, others angry. Perhaps you're wondering why I would leave control to Natalie rather than my real family. Theo's use of air quotes made several people shift uncomfortably. For the past 5 years, I've been conducting what you might call an extended character assessment. After witnessing how Natalie was treated at the company Christmas party, I realized I needed to be more deliberate about my legacy. The family exchanged confused glances as Theo continued. Richard, when I presented you with scenarios about employee benefits versus short-term profits, you consistently chose the latter without considering human impact. Margaret, when I introduced you to promising young people who needed mentorship, you dismissed them if they couldn't enhance your social status. Wesley, I gave you multiple opportunities to lead projects. You delegated responsibility while claiming credit for others' work. Brooke, when I offered to fund your charitable interests, you created a foundation that spent more on galas than on actual charity. Each accusation hit its target with surgical precision. No one could meet Theo's eyes, even through a screen. What none of you knew, Theo continued, is that for 5 years, Natalie has been working with me to learn every aspect of Mitchell Industries. While maintaining her own career, she completed an executive MBA program I privately funded and has been consulting on major company initiatives under the name Elizabeth James. Natalie's heart pounded as pieces fell into place. The consulting work Theo had asked her to do, the business courses he'd encouraged, the meetings with executives who'd known her only by her pseudonym, it had all been preparation. The marketing strategy that increased our market share by 23%, Natalie's work. The restructuring plan that saved us $15 million in operational costs. Also Natalie's the expansion into renewable energy that positions us for the next decade. Her vision entirely. Theo's expression softened. Natalie has demonstrated every quality I value: intelligence without arrogance, ambition without ruthlessness, and compassion without weakness. She understands that business is about creating value, not just extracting it. He turned his attention back to the family. This decision isn't made from malice. Each of you will receive generous trust funds ensuring comfortable lives. But Mitchell Industries deserves leadership that embodies its values, not simply its DNA. As the video ended, Lawrence turned on the lights. Natalie, as the new controlling shareholder of Mitchell Industries, would you like to say anything? All eyes turned to her: shock, anger, and in a few cases, dawning calculation. She could reject the inheritance, escape the family that had never wanted her, and return to her quiet life. Or she could accept Theo's gift, not just wealth, but purpose, responsibility, and vindication. Slowly, she stood and moved to the head of the table. I think Grandfather has said everything that needs to be said, she stated calmly. I accept the responsibilities he's entrusted to me, including the 1-year probationary period. Lawrence, please continue with the proceedings. As Lawrence concluded the formal proceedings, outlining generous but not extravagant trust funds for each family member, the stunned silence gave way to furious whispers and calculating glances. The family's initial shock was rapidly transforming into strategic thinking. If Natalie had only 1 year to prove herself, they had 1 year to ensure she failed. "This is temporary," Margaret hissed to Richard as they gathered their belongings. 1 year, and then everything goes back to normal. "I'm calling Harrison Corp tonight," Gerald muttered to Victoria. "They've been trying to acquire Mitchell Industries for years. If we can create enough chaos—" Wesley, his face flushed with alcohol and rage, cornered Natalie as she reviewed documents with Lawrence. "You think you're so smart, don't you? But you have no idea what you're walking into. Running a company isn't like your little marketing job." "I guess we'll find out," Natalie replied evenly, refusing to be baited. Brooke approached with a sudden saccharine smile. "Natalie, sweetie, I hope there are no hard feelings. We're family, after all. I'd love to discuss some ideas I have for expanding our social media presence." The transparent attempt at positioning for advantage was almost laughable. Within hours of learning about the inheritance, the family was already maneuvering for whatever scraps they could claim. As the conference room emptied, Lawrence remained behind with Natalie. "They'll try to sabotage you," he said without preamble. Theo anticipated this. That's why he structured the deal as he did. The board evaluation provides protection, and the 1-year timeline limits their ability to cause lasting damage. "What exactly am I walking into?" Natalie asked, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility. Lawrence handed her a thick folder. "Mitchell Industries is sound, but there are challenges. We're facing increased competition. Some of our manufacturing processes need updating, and there's been discussion about a potential hostile takeover by Harrison Corporation." "Harrison Corp?" Natalie looked up sharply. "Aren't they our biggest competitor?" "Among others. They've been circling for 2 years, waiting for the right moment. Your grandfather's death might provide the opportunity they've been seeking, especially if they can destabilize the leadership transition." As Natalie left the building, she noticed Gerald deep in conversation on his phone in the parking garage. When he spotted her, he quickly ended the call, but not before she heard the words Harrison and timeline. The battle for Mitchell Industries had begun, and she was walking into it with targets on her back from both inside and outside the company. Natalie's first day as interim CEO of Mitchell Industries began at 6 a.m. with a crisis. Helena Chen, the CFO, called her cell phone with urgent news. "We have a problem," Helena said without preamble. "The Yamamoto deal. Someone leaked our negotiation strategy to the press. The Japanese partners are threatening to pull out, claiming we were negotiating in bad faith." The Yamamoto partnership was crucial, a $50 million manufacturing contract that would expand Mitchell Industries into Asian markets. Losing it would be a significant blow to both revenue and company morale. "How could this have leaked?" Natalie asked, already dressing for the office. "That's what we need to find out. The information came from our internal strategy documents. Only 5 people had access to those files." Natalie's stomach sank. She had a strong suspicion about the source of the leak, but proving it would be another matter entirely. At Mitchell Industries headquarters, she found the executive team already assembled in crisis mode. The conference room buzzed with damage control strategies and pointed questions about information security. "The leak had to come from someone with board-level access," said Marcus Rivera, head of international operations. The documents contained details that weren't shared with the broader team. Natalie studied the faces around the table. These people had worked with Theo for years, had supported his decision to name her successor. But trust, she was learning, was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I want a complete audit of who accessed those files and when," she said. "Helena, can you coordinate with Iti?" "Already on it," Helena replied. "But Natalie, there's something else. 3 board members have requested an emergency meeting to Discuss the leadership transition in light of recent events. The message was clear: one crisis, and they were already questioning her competence. Natalie felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had as a child, when the family made her feel like she didn't belong, but she wasn't a child anymore. "Schedule the board meeting for this afternoon," she said firmly, "and get me a meeting with the Yamamoto team via video conference. If we move quickly, we might be able to salvage this." Over the next 6 hours, Natalie worked with controlled intensity. She personally called Yamamoto executives, explaining the situation and proposing additional transparency measures. She reviewed security protocols and implemented new restrictions on sensitive documents. Most importantly, she presented the board with a comprehensive response plan that demonstrated both accountability and leadership. The IT audit revealed that Wesley Anderson had accessed the files 2 days earlier using Richard's login credentials that should have been deactivated after Theo's death. When confronted, Wesley claimed he was just trying to stay informed about family business, but the timing of the leak left little doubt about his intentions. The board meeting was tense, but Natalie's swift response to the crisis impressed several members. By day's end, the Yamamoto deal was back on track, though the damage to internal trust would take longer to repair. As she left the office that evening, Natalie found a note on her car windshield. "This is just the beginning. You don't belong here, and we'll prove it." 3 weeks later, the second attack came from an unexpected direction. Harrison Corporation announced a major acquisition in the renewable energy sector, the exact market segment Mitchell Industries was planning to enter with a substantial investment. The announcement sent Mitchell's stock price tumbling and raised serious questions about the company's strategic planning. But more troubling was the timing. Harrison's move perfectly countered Mitchell's expansion plans, as if they'd had access to internal strategic documents. "They're trying to force us into a bidding war we can't win," Helena explained during an emergency executive meeting. "If we proceed with our planned investment now, we'll be competing directly with Harrison on their terms." "What are our options?" Natalie asked, studying the financial projections on her laptop screen. "We could pivot to a different market segment, but that would mean scrapping 8 months of development work," Marcus suggested. "Or we could proceed as planned and hope our superior technology gives us an edge." "There's a third option," Helena said quietly. "We could sell our renewable energy division to Harrison before they drive down its value further. It would give us the liquidity to pursue other opportunities." The room fell silent. Selling to Harrison would be seen as capitulation, proof that Natalie couldn't compete with established players. "What would Grandfather have done?" Natalie asked, more to herself than to the room. "He would have found a way to turn their strength against them," said Dr. Patricia Wong, the head of R&D who had worked with Theo for 15 years. "Theodore never competed on others' terms. He changed the game entirely." That evening, Natalie stayed late in Theo's former office, now hers, studying every document related to the renewable energy project. The red journal Lawrence had mentioned sat open on her desk, filled with Theo's observations about market trends, competitor analysis, and strategic opportunities. One entry caught her attention: Harrison's weakness. They think big means better. They'll overextend themselves chasing market share. Real opportunity lies in niche excellence, not broad dominance. An idea began to form. Instead of competing with Harrison for the broad renewable energy market, what if Mitchell Industries focused on a specific, underserved niche? The documents showed growing demand for renewable energy solutions in remote locations, mining operations, island communities, disaster relief scenarios. It was a smaller market initially, but one where technological innovation mattered more than marketing budgets, where Mitchell's engineering expertise could provide real competitive advantage. The next morning, Natalie presented her alternative strategy to the executive team. Instead of a $100 million investment competing directly with Harrison, she proposed a focused $50 million initiative targeting specialized renewable energy applications. "It's riskier," Helena admitted, "but the potential returns are higher, and we'd be establishing ourselves in a market segment Harrison isn't even considering. The board approved the revised strategy, but several members expressed skepticism about abandoning the original plan. Natalie knew she was gambling her credibility on an unproven approach. 2 days later, her gamble faced its biggest test. Richard appeared in her office with Gerald and Victoria, their expressions grim. "Natalie, we need to talk," Richard said, closing the door behind them. "The family is concerned about the direction you're taking the company." "Concerned how?" she asked. Though she suspected she knew where this was heading. These risky investments, the strategic pivots, this isn't how Theodore ran the company, Gerald said. "We think it might be time to consider bringing in more experienced leadership to advise you." "By experienced leadership, you mean yourselves?" "We mean people who understand the family legacy," Victoria replied. "Harrison Corporation has made a very generous offer to acquire Mitchell Industries. It would ensure the family's financial security and preserve Theodore's achievement." The betrayal was breathtaking in its boldness. They weren't even waiting for her to fail, they were actively working to ensure it. "I see," Natalie said calmly. "And I assume you've already been in discussions with Harrison about this generous offer." The guilty glances they exchanged told her everything she needed to know. "Get out of my office," she said quietly. "All of you." "Natalie, be reasonable," Richard began. "Get out." After they left, Natalie sat alone in the gathering darkness, understanding for the first time the true scope of what she faced. This wasn't just about proving her competence or honoring Theo's wishes. It was about survival, both hers and the company's. The revelation about Harrison Corporation's offer sent Natalie into investigative mode. If the family was actively working to undermine her, she needed to know the full extent of their plans. Lawrence Bennett proved invaluable. As executor of Theo's estate, he had legal standing to examine certain family communications, and what he discovered was damning. "They've been planning this since the day of the will reading," he told Natalie during a private meeting at his office. "Gerald has been acting as an intermediary with Harrison, promising them they can acquire Mitchell Industries at a below-market price once you're removed." "How can they remove me? The board would have to vote." "They're planning to create a crisis severe enough that the board has no choice," Lawrence interrupted. "A major contract failure, a financial scandal, anything that makes continuing under your leadership seem impossible." He slid a folder across the desk. Phone records, email metadata, meeting logs. Gerald has been in contact with Harrison executives at least twice a week for the past month. Natalie studied the documents, her anger building with each page. "They're willing to destroy Grandfather's life work just to spite me." "There's more. Harrison isn't just interested in acquiring Mitchell Industries, they want to break it up and sell the pieces. The manufacturing operations would go to China. R&D would be eliminated, and most employees would be laid off." The full scope of the betrayal hit her like a physical blow. The family wasn't just sabotaging her, they were preparing to destroy everything Theo had built, everything he'd stood for. "We need evidence of active sabotage," Natalie said, her mind racing. "Something that proves they're deliberately harming the company." "I might be able to help with that," came a voice from the doorway. They turned to see Wesley Anderson, looking uncharacteristically sober and serious. "Wesley," Natalie said, shocked. "How did you—" "Lawrence called me," he said, stepping into the office. "Look, I know I've been a complete ass to you for years. I know I leaked that information to hurt you. But this—" He gestured at the documents on the desk. "They want to sell the company to Harrison and cut me out entirely. Apparently, I'm too unreliable to be trusted with the proceeds." He pulled out his phone and set it on the desk. "I recorded their planning meeting yesterday. Gerald, Mom, Dad, they're all in on it. They want to force a crisis that makes the board remove you within the next 2 months." The recording was devastating. Gerald's voice was clear as he outlined their strategy. "We manufacture a series of setbacks, missed deadlines, cost overruns, maybe a safety incident at one of the plants. Each one by itself is manageable, but together they create a pattern of incompetent leadership. Margaret's voice was equally damning. The board will have no choice but to remove her. Once Richard is back in control, we finalize the Harrison deal and divide the proceeds according to our agreement. "Why are you helping me?" Natalie asked Wesley when the recording ended. Wesley was quiet for a long moment. "Because I finally understand what Grandfather saw in you. These past few weeks, watching you work, seeing how you treat people. You're trying to build something, not just extract value from it. And because I'm tired of being a failure." It was the most honest thing Wesley had ever said to her. "What do they have planned?" she asked. "A safety incident at the Portland plant next week. Gerald has someone on the inside, a maintenance supervisor, who's been promised a big payout if he causes a preventable accident that looks like management negligence." Armed with evidence of the conspiracy, Natalie faced the most difficult decision of her tenure. She could expose the family's betrayal, but doing so would create a public scandal that could damage Mitchell Industries regardless of who controlled it. Or she could try to outmaneuver them while protecting the company's reputation. She chose a third option. The emergency board meeting was called for Friday afternoon. Gerald, convinced that his manufactured crisis was proceeding as planned, arrived confident and smug. Margaret and Richard flanked him, their expressions appropriately grave for the serious concerns about leadership they planned to raise. What they didn't expect was to find FBI agents waiting in the conference room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Natalie said as the family took their seats in stunned silence, "before we begin today's meeting, I need to address some serious allegations that have come to my attention." She nodded to Agent Sarah Mitchell, no relation to Theo, who stepped forward with a folder of documents. "Gerald Anderson, you're under investigation for conspiracy to commit corporate sabotage and insider trading." Agent Mitchell announced, "Your communications with Harrison Corporation constitute potential securities fraud, and your plan to manufacture safety incidents puts workers at risk." And the color drained from Gerald's face. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can," Natalie said, pressing play on an audio device. Gerald's voice filled the room, outlining his strategy for forcing her removal and facilitating Harrison's acquisition of the company. The board members sat in shocked silence as the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed. Richard buried his face in his hands while Margaret stared at her brother-in-law in horror. "Furthermore," Agent Mitchell continued, "Mr. Wesley Anderson has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for immunity. The maintenance supervisor at your Portland plant has also confessed and agreed to testify." As federal agents escorted Gerald from the building, the remaining board members turned to Natalie with a mixture of respect and amazement. "How long have you known," asked board chairman David Chen, "about the conspiracy? 3 days. But I've been tracking unusual activities and communications patterns for weeks." She looked directly at Richard and Margaret. "I had hoped family loyalty meant something, but I learned to verify everything." The meeting that followed was unlike any in Mitchell Industries' history. With the threat of external manipulation removed, the board could focus on the company's actual performance under Natalie's leadership. The results spoke for themselves. The renewable energy pivot was showing early promise. Employee satisfaction scores had improved significantly, and the company's stock price had stabilized despite the market uncertainty. "I motion to remove the 1-year probationary period," said Dr. Patricia Wong. "Ms. Anderson has demonstrated exceptional leadership under extraordinary circumstances." The motion passed unanimously. The news of Gerald's arrest and the conspiracy to sabotage Mitchell Industries made headlines in the business press, but Natalie managed to control the narrative by focusing on the company's resilience and forward-looking strategy. Harrison Corporation, exposed for their role in the conspiracy, faced their own legal challenges and quickly distanced themselves from any acquisition discussions. The impact on the Anderson family was devastating, but also, surprisingly, cathartic. Richard, horrified by his role in the conspiracy, publicly apologized and announced his resignation from Mitchell Industries' board. "My daughter, and she is my daughter, regardless of biology, has shown more integrity and leadership than I've demonstrated in years. I need to step back and figure out how to earn back her trust." Margaret's response was more complex. Initially defiant, she gradually began to understand the magnitude of what she'd almost destroyed. The therapy sessions Richard insisted they attend together forced her to confront her own insecurities and the way she'd projected them onto Natalie. Wesley, true to his promise to cooperate with authorities, entered a rehabilitation program for his alcohol addiction. His testimony against Gerald was thorough and damning, but it also marked the beginning of genuine change in his life. Brooks surprised everyone by requesting a meeting with Natalie to discuss a genuine role in the company. "I've been coasting on family connections my whole life," she admitted. "Watching you fight for something you believe in made me realize I've never fought for anything that mattered." Natalie offered her an entry-level position in the marketing department with the same performance expectations as any other employee. To everyone's surprise, Brooke accepted. The extended family's reactions varied. Some, like Cousin Kyle, reached out to express support and curiosity about legitimate opportunities with the company. Others, like Aunt Victoria, remained bitter and distant. 6 months after Gerald's arrest, Mitchell Industries was thriving under Natalie's leadership. The specialized renewable energy division had secured its first major contract, a $50 million project to provide sustainable power solutions for remote mining operations in Alaska. The success validated Natalie's strategic pivot and silenced the remaining critics on the board. But the real transformation was cultural. Where once Mitchell Industries had been a traditional hierarchy focused primarily on profit margins, it was becoming something more dynamic and purposeful. Natalie had implemented several initiatives that reflected Theo's values while addressing modern business realities. The employee profit-sharing program ensured that success was shared throughout the organization. The Innovation Lab gave engineers and designers time to pursue breakthrough projects. The Community Investment Fund directed 2% of annual profits toward educational programs in underserved areas. "You're building something special here," Helena Chen told Natalie during their weekly executive meeting. "Employee retention is at an all-time high, and we're attracting top talent from competitors who can't match our culture." The vindication felt good, but what mattered more to Natalie was the sense of purpose. She wasn't just running a company, she was stewarding Theo's legacy while creating something new. The family dynamics continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Richard had kept his promise to step back from company affairs, but he'd also made genuine efforts to repair his relationship with Natalie. Their monthly dinners were awkward at first, but gradually became opportunities for honest conversation. "I failed you as a father," he admitted during one such dinner. "I was so focused on maintaining peace with Margaret that I let her insecurities dictate how we treated you. That's on me, not her." Margaret's journey was more complicated. Pride and defensiveness warred with genuine remorse, and some days one won over the other. But she was trying. Attending therapy sessions and making tentative overtures toward reconciliation. Wesley's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. Clean and sober for 4 months. He'd thrown himself into community engagement work with the intensity of someone discovering purpose for the first time. His initiatives to connect Mitchell Industries with local vocational schools had created pathways for dozens of young people to enter skilled trades. "I spent my whole life being angry about what I thought I deserved," he told Natalie during one of their weekly check-ins. "It took nearly losing everything to realize I needed to earn what I wanted." Brooke's adjustment to actual work was more challenging, but she was persevering. Her social media background proved valuable in developing Mitchell's digital marketing strategy, and her natural charisma translated well to client presentations. "I'm good at this," she said with genuine surprise after successfully closing a mid-sized contract. "I never knew work could be satisfying." The most unexpected development came from outside the immediate family. Dr. Patricia Wong approached Natalie with a proposal that would honor Theo's memory while expanding the company's impact. Theodore always believed that great companies have responsibilities beyond their shareholders, Patricia explained. What if we created a foundation focused on supporting orphaned and foster children, pursuing education in science and engineering? The Theodore Mitchell Foundation for Young Innovators launched 6 months later with an initial endowment of $10 million. The first class of scholarship recipients included 12 remarkable young people whose stories reminded Natalie of her own journey, talented individuals who just needed someone to believe in them. 1 year after that devastating will reading, Natalie stood in Theo's former office, now unmistakably hers, preparing for the annual board meeting. The transformation was complete in ways she could never have imagined. Mitchell Industries had not only survived the transition and family crisis, but had emerged stronger. Revenue was up 18%. The company had entered 3 new market segments, and employee satisfaction scores were the highest in the industry. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't what would have made Theo proudest. Raymond knocked on her door, carrying his afternoon tea service, a tradition he'd maintained since becoming her informal advisor on company culture. "The board members are arriving," he reported, settling into the chair across from her desk. At 76, he moved more slowly, but his mind remained sharp and his insights invaluable. "Nervous?" he asked, noting her pensive mood. "Reflective," she replied. "A year ago, I was a marketing director in Seattle with a comfortable but unremarkable life. Now you're exactly who Mr. Theo always knew you could be," Raymond finished. "He'd be proud of what you've built, not just the business success, but the way you've handled the family, the values you've maintained." Through the office windows, Natalie could see the company parking lot where employees from every level of the organization parked side by side, a small change from the previous executive-only section, but one that symbolized the cultural shift she'd fostered. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if he'd told me his plans earlier," she mused. "You'd have tried to be who you thought he wanted instead of becoming who you really were," Raymond said with the wisdom of someone who'd watched the Mitchell family dynamics for decades. "The uncertainty made you rely on your own judgment, develop your own leadership style." The board meeting went smoothly, a stark contrast to the crisis-driven sessions of the previous year. The quarterly reports showed continued growth. The renewable energy division was exceeding projections, and the foundation had received recognition from educational organizations nationwide. As the meeting concluded, Board Chairman David Chen approached Natalie privately. "The board has voted unanimously to remove all remaining restrictions on your leadership," he said. "Theodore's probationary period is officially over, though I think we all agree it ended months ago." That evening, Natalie drove to the cemetery where Theo rested. The autumn air was crisp, and golden leaves carpeted the ground around his headstone. She brought fresh orchids from Raymond's greenhouse, descendants of the plants Theo had cultivated for decades. "1 year," she said softly, settling onto the bench facing his grave. "You probably knew it would work out, didn't you? You always were better at seeing the long game than the rest of us." She updated him on the company's progress, the family's healing, and the foundation's impact. But mostly, she sat in comfortable silence, feeling the peace that came with knowing she'd honored his trust. "I understand now why you did it the way you did," she continued. "Not just the inheritance, but the secrecy, the testing, even the 1-year probation. You weren't just giving me a company, you were giving me a chance to discover who I really was when everything was on the line." The wind rustled through the trees, and she could almost hear his approving chuckle. "I miss you," she whispered. "But I'm not that lost little girl anymore, wondering if she belongs anywhere. I know exactly who I am and where I belong." As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed with a text message from Wesley. "Board meeting went well. Brooke and I were thinking of taking you to dinner to celebrate. Dad and Margaret want to come too, if that's okay." A year ago, Such a message would have seemed impossible. The family that had once made her feel like an outsider was slowly, imperfectly, learning to be an actual family. She typed back, "That sounds perfect. Pick somewhere Grandfather would have liked." Walking back to her car, Natalie felt lighter than she had in years. The little girl who had never felt good enough, who had always been reminded she wasn't real family, was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. The path ahead would have challenges business always did. The family relationships would continue to evolve, some successfully, others perhaps not. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't navigating it alone in giving her his material legacy. Theo had confirmed what his love had been telling her all along, that family isn't defined by blood, but by choice, by actions, by consistent love and support. She had spent her entire life searching for belonging, never realizing that Theo had already created a place for her, not just in his will, but in his heart, and in the company and values he'd built. As she drove through the city lights toward dinner with her complicated, imperfect, but genuinely trying family. Natalie smiled. The underdog had not only won, she had transformed the very nature of the game. At the restaurant, she found them already seated, Richard looking genuinely proud, Margaret making an effort to be warm, Wesley healthy and focused, Brooke animated as she described her latest project's success. They weren't perfect, and probably never would be, but they were hers, and she was theirs, and that was enough. To Grandfather Theo, Wesley raised his glass when she arrived. And to the family he always knew we could become, to the future, Natalie replied, raising her own glass, and to never forgetting where we came from. As they clinked glasses, she felt Theo's presence in the warmth of the moment, in the laughter that followed, and in the knowledge that his greatest achievement wasn't the billion-dollar company he'd built, it was the family he'd ultimately helped create through love, wisdom, and one perfectly executed final lesson. The true legacy wasn't what he'd left behind, but who he'd left it to, and how that choice had changed everything for everyone.